Hello, good morning. I've had Adele in my head all day. I've been listening to Adele in my cold showers quite a bit lately, singing poorly at the top of my lungs. The song on my mind today is Hello. I almost opened the broadcast with Hello, but I didn't. But now I just did, so who knows? Anyway, got Adele on the brain. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Whole30 Day 26. Kate has been looking forward to this all week. So have I, because today's the day, that we talk about reintroduction. Today is the day that we're going to talk about reintro, the schedule, the live series, what you're doing, when you're doing it. We're going to talk about all of that. Today I've got some resources. I've got some fun graphics for you. Today is the day. It's happening. I will stop that from scrolling so that it doesn't scroll the whole time. But I might throw it back up a couple times because I think it's very fun. That's not what I wanted to do. Good morning, Abby. From Manitoba, -17. I'm assuming you mean Celsius? Maybe that's Fahrenheit. I don't know. They both sound terrible to me. And that is a very cold shower. Yes. Good morning, but good for you for getting in there and doing it. We've got Whole30 HQ in the comments. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning. Put a Q over your question so I can see that it's a question. Laura's ready to make a good reintroduction. I'm ready too. This time is going to be different for everyone. This is going to be the best reintroduction we've ever done. The most support, the most clarity, the most number of resources, because every year we add to our Whole30 reintroduction resources. You've got some homework for tomorrow. Oh, it's like good homework, but we're showing up prepared today. We are showing up prepared. And yes, as you are joining us, getting ready to talk about reintroduction, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I have so many fun little video things up, but now I don't. There it is. There's my little YouTube subscribe button floating up by my head for some reason. I don't know. And make sure you click that little thumbs up to like the video, which helps us get this video and others out to people who are doing the Whole30 and make sure that they get our accurate information. And yes, of course, we will be showing a replay, as we always do. You can go back and watch any of the replays. Throw it on while you are cleaning, while you're meal prepping, while you're walking, while you're driving. Just throw it on and listen. It doesn't even have to be related to that particular day. We have excellent conversations about all kinds of things every single day here. Throw it on and listen. Good morning, Renelle. Good to see you again. Your NSV is finding other ways to cope with anxiety beside food and drink. You've been coloring. I love that idea. I have got to tell you, this is like the third time that the universe has thrown out the idea that I maybe could invest in a coloring book. I see them at Barnes & Noble all the time, and they're so intricate and pretty, and the idea of just 20 super sharp, different colored pencils sounds so appealing to me, and I could imagine it being very zen, as long as you didn't get too uptight about coloring in the lines or staying in the lines. I love that idea. You may have inspired me. I think I may know what I am doing this weekend is going to Barnes & Noble and looking for a coloring book. I love that. Welcome back, Hiroko. I hope things in Washington are good. You switched to Fahrenheit for me. Thank you, Abby. I only know 3 Celsius to Fahrenheit conversions. That's all I know. I could do the math in my head approximately, but I appreciate the conversion there for those of us who did not major in math. Thank you. Emily, who is Matthew. Hello from St. Louis. NSV, stubborn little bumps on the back of your arms are gone. Oh yeah, that's good. I think that's called keratosis pilaris, the little, just completely innocuous, but little bumps of buildup from clogged hair follicles, I think. And if they're gone, that means that your skin is super happy and healthy, and maybe you are expelling some stuff that shouldn't be there. So fantastic. I love noticing that. That is a very good NSV. Crystal, good morning. Getting more excited about cooking again, making veggies. The star, I love that. You ordered a few Whole30 cookbooks last night. I love that. Tell us what you ordered here in the comments. There are a ton of cookbooks, either Whole30 cookbooks that I wrote, Whole30 endorsed cookbooks from some of your favorite authors like Autumn Michaelis or Kirsten Buck. Buck Naked Kitchen, I've been cooking from that a ton. Kirsten has a meatball recipe, a turkey meatball recipe in there that is on rotation regularly. I love Primal Gourmet, Ronnie Joseph, Terry Turner, No Crumbs Left, Alex of Defined Dish, Michelle Smith, fantastic sources of Whole30 endorsed cookbooks. And then I have lots of friends who have cookbooks with lots of Whole30 recipes, like Danielle Walker and Michelle Tam. So no shortage of Whole30 cookbooks, and I love to hear that you are picking some up. So fantastic. Cheryl is saying on dry eyes, oh yeah, we talked about this. You've experienced it. Your ophthalmologist says no correlation between diet and dry eyes. Interesting. I don't know. Anytime someone says there's no correlation whatsoever between diet and XYZ, I look at it with a little bit of skepticism. Like, might you say there's no correlation between diet and having good hair days? Okay. But what if your diet includes more protein and more bone broth and more collagen, and then it makes your hair a little healthier and a little shinier? Maybe there's a correlation, and I could maybe see a correlation between diet and dry eyes. But if you are sleeping better, maybe that correlates to what's happening with your eyelids. I don't know. I'm really interested in this, and now I might do a little bit of a deep dive to see if I can come up with a little bit more information. I'm no ophthalmologist, but I think it's really interesting. So yes, and eye drops, of course. Kara is saying, hi from Minnesota, excited for reintroduction. In case you missed my fabulous graphic, today is the day that we are talking about. No, that's not it. This one, reintroduction. So I'm really glad that you're here too. You've never taken this part seriously, and you're in a space where you understand how vital it is. That is going to be the first thing that we talk about. And I'm going to do it briefly because I don't need to repeat the wheel or reinvent the wheel, repeat myself, because I'm going to give you a little homework, but we are going to talk about how important reintroduction is to your food freedom. We're going to hammer it home. Abby's noticing that too. Fantastic. We love to see it. Whole30 Fast and Easy is one of your go-to cookbooks. I also love that one. That one's definitely on repeat in my house. I've been making a lot of slow cooker recipes lately too, because it just feels good to like throw stuff in a slow cooker and let it go. But I love it. Good morning, Kathleen. I'm glad your chat came up for you so you can say hi. Good morning. Good morning. I am also excited as well. We are going to jump right in because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. The day we talk about reintroduction. All right, I won't do that anymore, but I'm just happy that I figured out how to animate text on these. Today's the day in Whole30 Day by Day that we start talking about reintroduction, but we have been talking about it, you and I, all along, because reintroduction is part of the Whole30. Hard stop. You can't do the Whole30 if you don't reintroduce, because you're only doing half of the learning experiment. Let's backtrack briefly. The Whole30 is an elimination program designed to help you identify food sensitivities. You are eliminating foods that are commonly problematic to varying degrees and seeing how the elimination of these foods impacts your energy, your sleep, your mood, your digestion, your cravings, your joint pain and swelling, your acne, allergies, asthma, migraines, dry eyes, all of those things, except for maybe dry eyes, according to Cheryl's ophthalmologist, could be impacted by your diet. So you're pulling things out, seeing what changes. At the end of those 30 days, if on day 31, you think, okay, cool, I'm done with my Whole30, I'm sleeping better, my energy is better, my arms feel smoother, I'm no longer breaking out, my digestion is better, I'm no longer bloated, I have far less anxiety, I'm no longer experiencing migraines, all of these things that I've heard just this month from you. If on day 31, you say, sweet, this is amazing, I can't wait to reintroduce some foods, and you add back in pizza and beer and ice cream and chocolate and potato chips and tacos with beans and sour cream and cheese, and you just eat all the things that you want to eat all on the same day. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, I don't feel good. I am bloated again. My energy is down again. My joint pain and swelling came back. I felt like I was going to get a migraine all morning. My skin broke out this morning. How are you going to know? How are you going to know the foods that may have contributed to these negative effects that you're noticing? The answer is you won't. Reintroduction is a mission-critical part of the self-experiment so that you bring foods back in carefully and systematically, one food group at a time. So when you bring one food back in, Think about it like a scientific experiment where the Whole30 is your control and the reintroduction group is your experimental group. Think back to like 4th grade science. I had to dig back through to remember the terms. Your control is the Whole30. You know how you've been feeling on the Whole30 for the last 30 days. If you bring something back in and your baseline doesn't change, cool. That food didn't really have much of an impact at all, or at least not much of a noticeable impact. Great, awesome. If you bring it back in and all of a sudden your baseline changes dramatically, you know that the reintroduction of that food group had an impact on how you feel. Now, it's not to say that you then have to avoid that food for the rest of your life because that food is bad. Not at all. We'll talk about what it means when you reintroduce something and you notice an effect. What it means is that you now know that there is a connection between that food and your system. And you know what that connection is, and you know what it might do to you. What you choose to do with that information and your food freedom is totally up to you. I would never attempt to dictate that. We don't, as the Whole30. We are not a prescriptive way of eating. But I want you to know. And if you spend 30 days giving up a lot of foods that you love, working as hard as you've worked for the last 26 days now, don't you want that to count? Don't you want to learn? You want to like squeeze the juice out of as much of the learning experience as you possibly can. I know I do. I'm not going to give up things I love for 30 days and then not learn as much as I could from the experience. So reintroduction is mission critical to your Whole30 self-experiment because the goal is to learn as much as you can about how foods work in your unique context. And the way that you learn is to have 2 experiences to compare: elimination and reintroduction. And both of them should be completed carefully, tactically, patiently, strategically. And that's what I'm going to outline here for you today. So reintroduction is a necessary part of the Whole30. And JC is here for the first time, and I'm pumped that you're here for this episode, this edition, because this is the one that is going to be so important for your Whole30 experience, but also for your food freedom. So I want to talk about this briefly. Let me jump in really fast. Wendy, I did not get an answer yet about Food Freedom Forever in Audible. I will absolutely follow up with my UK publisher again. I tend to miss them because I send emails late in the day when they are already out of the office, but I will absolutely follow up and make sure. Thanks for reminding me. And Jessica was saying yesterday, we talked about how reintroduction is not always showing an obvious food sensitivity, which is true. We are going to absolutely talk about that. So I talked about the idea of reintroduction being part of the Whole30. And if you're a Gretchen Rubin upholder like I am, you're like, okay, I'll do that. If you tell me that reintroduction is part of the Whole30 and I committed to the Whole30, okay, I'll do that. If you are an obliger and you need that like accountability, there's so much accountability for your reintroduction. There's accountability in these lives. There's accountability in Whole30 day by day. There's accountability on the Whole30 social media feed where we'll be posting reintroduction resources today and Monday and ongoing. There's tons of accountability. And I'm telling you right now, obligers, that there is no saying, I did the Whole30, I finished the Whole30, if you don't have a complete reintroduction period. That's the message I'm going to give to you for the obligers. If you're a questioner, I'm going to explain to you why there is no food freedom without reintroduction. So you're going to go, yeah, that makes total sense. Okay. And if you're a rebel, I'm going to say this. I didn't plan on doing this, but I'm going to finish it because we're in it now. If you are a rebel, the diet industry and society in general expects you to white knuckle your way through these dietary experiments and then immediately go back to your old behaviors because you deserve to treat yourself, because you deserve to have that glass of wine after a hard day, because having a rough day means that you should automatically comfort yourself with food and drink. That's what everybody expects you to do. That's what the diet industry expects you to do, because if you don't fall off the wagon hard, they have no reason to tell you, come on back and pay for our diet again. They expect you to do that, and you're not going to do that. You are not going to fall victim to stepping on the scale and letting that be your measure of success. You're not going to fall victim to being done and exhausting all your willpower and going right back to the weight. You're not doing that. You are going to say, no, thank you. I am going to carefully and systematically reintroduce, and I am going to take my sweet time. I'm going to take as long as I want and as long as I need because I will learn as much from this experience as I can. And it is not going to be about the scale weight or the size of my body. It's going to be about something else. That is like giving a big old middle finger to diet culture and the patriarchy and media influences. And that's how you're going to think about it if you're a rebel. Now, let's talk about reintroduction when it comes to food freedom. You know that the basis of food freedom is two simple questions, right? Is it worth it or do I want it? Is it worth it and do I want it? When I am looking at a food or beverage that is not part of my Whole30, say I'm out to dinner with my husband on a date night and the waiter says, would you like a glass of wine? I'm immediately going to pause before I answer and I'm going to go, is it worth it? I won't know how to answer that question unless I have done a reintroduction and compared my experience. Without reintroduction, I know that I felt great when I didn't drink for 30 days, but I have no idea how I'm going to feel when I bring that wine back. So it is like a crapshoot. I am not going to be able to answer the question, is it worth it? I don't know. I never did a reintroduction. I just brought everything all back at once and I felt like crap for a week. And then I had a really hard time getting back to a place where I felt like I was in healthy balance, or maybe I never did. And I felt like, all of the learnings and all of the good feelings of my Whole30 just like went right out the window. I don't know. Without reintroduction, there is no food freedom. You will not know how to answer that question, is it worth it? And frankly, you won't be able to answer the question, do I want it? Because you'll probably always want it. There will be no thought process, no structure, no moment of self-awareness and practice of self-awareness for you to say, given how I know it's going to impact me, that is it worth it part, do I actually want it? Because do I want it does not live in a vacuum. Do I want it? The answer, if you ask somebody in the moment, like, hey, you want that? They're probably going to go, yeah, sure, I'd want that. But when you pause and you think about it in conjunction with, is it worth it? I talked about this yesterday with wine. I always want to want a glass of wine. I want a glass of wine until you ask me if I want it, and then I go, no, I really don't. I was talking to my dad about this. I think he talked about this when he did his live with me last weekend. My dad was like, I joke about donuts all the time. Buy me a donut. Hey, bring me a donut. Hey, pick up donuts. But if you were to bring me home a donut, I would look at it and I would go, no, no thanks. I don't really want it. I want to want the donut, but I don't really want it. That is what reintroduction can give you in your food freedom. And again, the answer is not always to say no. The answer is to make educated, informed decisions based on what is in your highest interest as you decide in that moment. You can't have food freedom without reintroduction. And we want food freedom. That's the whole goal of the Whole30. We want to get you to food freedom so that you are working your own food program. You're eating in a way that feels sustainable and delicious and fun and joyful and recognizes family favorites and cultural significant foods and in a way that honors health according to your definition. You're going to decide that all for yourself. And I want you to be able to do that so that you never need a Whole30 again. Don't ever come back and do a Whole30 because you are so wildly successful in your Whole30 and reintroduction and food freedom that you never need a reset again. That would be amazing. But you can't do that unless you eliminate, reintroduce, compare your experience, and take that learning with you into food freedom. Okay? Now, there's an entire reintroduction webinar that I presented in September during the September Whole30. This is your homework. I am not doing a live tomorrow on Saturday. I need a Saturday off. And so I am going to politely set that healthy boundary for myself and my brain. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. There is a webinar on the Whole30 YouTube channel that I recorded just a few months ago about reintroduction. It's called Kickstart Your Reintroduction, and it is a 45 or 50-minute webinar that tomorrow or over the weekend you can play in the background. You can listen to me talk about reintroduction from every perspective whatsoever. The background, the history, why it's important, why it matters, how to do it, how to structure it, how to think about it, how to meal plan. All of that will be available to you tomorrow. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. That is your homework for tomorrow. What we're going to do today, now that I have talked about the importance of reintroduction, how it relates to your Whole30 experience, how it relates to your food freedom, I think we are like, if there's anybody in the chat who's like, I'm still not sold that I need reintroduction, go ahead and put your hand up. For real, I would love to help get you over the hump if you're considering the idea that like maybe reintroduction isn't that important. I would be surprised if you've been in these lives from day one, because we've been talking about this since day one. But please, if there's any questions or if there's anything else, any like holes or gaps I can fill in for you, raise your hand. But what we are going to do next is talk about the very specific reintroduction schedule that I've crafted for you here specifically for this YouTube live series. So let's go through the chat real quick and then we'll get in there. Duncan gave you a sweet tea instead of a cold brew. How dare they? How dare they? I definitely hope that they made it right for you. Dunkin's, my old stomping grounds. I love a good Dunkin' Donuts coffee. It's terrible, and I love it so much. I always get one when I go back east. You did not do reintroduction with your previous two Whole30s, and you're here to learn and do it right. That's right, Michelle. You sure will. And that's why this Whole30 is going to be the best Whole30 you have ever done. Love it, love it, love it. Betsy is a questioner, but also a little rebel. Let me know how that landed for you, Betsy. Rebels are sort of the hardest to talk to. You've got to like approach them from, and I've talked to Gretchen Rubin about this many times. You've got to approach from like a couple different angles until you find the one that gets them mad enough to go, yeah, screw that, I'm doing it. So I'll keep working on it, Betsy. Carol is saying it's your first time watching a live, third Whole30, and hope to stay focused on really doing reintroduction this time. Carol, you are going to. There's no hope. You absolutely will. We are going to prepare you so well. You're now here in this community. You can watch the replays. There's no way whatsoever you're not going to stay focused during your reintroduction. I absolutely see this for you. It is in the cards. It is absolutely happening. Lisa is saying reintroduction starts on your birthday, and then you've got 2 different trips coming up. Lisa, this is tough. This is why. So again, like no blame or anything here, but we generally say try to start your Whole30 where you've got 10 days after the elimination to do reintroduction in kind of a relaxed fashion. This is a sort of special subject that I might not get into in great degree here because it applies kind of just to you and doesn't apply to the general reintroduction schedule that I'm going to outline here. But there are some tips and tricks. I'm going to have to go in through the blog and talk and see if I've written about what happens if Whole30 starts on like a special occasion. If your first day of reintroduction is your birthday, I would say what you could do, tell you what, I'm going to go through the schedule. You're going to tell me how the schedule sounds to you. And then if you need some help modifying it, let me know, or you can like send me a DM because this might be beyond the scope of what I can cover in just this live, but we definitely have situations and help for you. It's going to require a little more patience on your part, a little more paying attention. And if all goes to hell in a handbasket and you get on vacation and you realize it's so hard to properly reintroduce around the temptation of vacation and whatever, I've got like a little plan for you to come back from vacation, go back to the Whole30 for a little while, and then reintroduce properly. So there's definitely a way that we can do it for you. Whole30 is posting the link to the reintroduction webinar. That is your homework for this weekend. So absolutely do it. And Kathleen, yeah, we're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about the intersection of Whole30, food freedom, and boundaries quite a bit coming up soon. I've got a post going up on Whole30 social media. We're going to talk about it here in the lives, but that is absolutely what we need to do. What a good question from Betsy. If you've done reintroduction before and you know sensitivities, should you do reintroduction again? Yes. Every time you do a Whole30, I want you to reintroduce by the book for a number of reasons. The first several Whole30s, when I reintroduced oatmeal, it did not go well. It gave me a heavy belly feeling and I got really sleepy and tired. Maybe after my April 2020 Whole30, I decided on a whim that I was going to reintroduce oatmeal again as part of my non-gluten grains, and I discovered my body loved it. My context had changed. My activity levels had changed. My diet had changed. My health had changed. And now all of a sudden, oatmeal was back on the menu. I have experienced that with a number of food groups. I tolerate dairy now better than I ever have before. in the right doses. Even gluten doesn't impact me quite as seriously as it used to. So as everything changes, your context changes, you change your health history, your current health, your goals, I want you to develop learnings specific to that period in your life. So I don't ever want you to just automatically assume, oh, no, I reintroduced this thing and it was fine, so I don't need to reintroduce it again, because I guarantee it's still going to be fine. Because what if something has changed and this thing that you reintroduced 3 years ago doesn't feel as good anymore? Maybe your baseline for normal is even better than it was 3 years ago, and you're so much more in tune with your body, and you reintroduce this thing and you go, oh no, this doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. That was me with wine. I used to swear during my early Whole30s that I could reintroduce one glass of wine with basically no side effects whatsoever. That was baloney. When I did my not drinking right now experiment back in 2019, I think, and reintroduced wine at the end of it, I was like, wow, not even a full glass, and I don't sleep anywhere near as well. I just don't feel good the next day. It really changed things for me. So if you're going to go through the effort of eliminate for 30 straight days and give up the foods that you love and do the hard work of elimination, again, I want you to make the most of that experience and just tack on those 10 little days where you're reintroducing some food groups and going back to the Whole30 so that you can dial in your food freedom approach even more. I always want you to reintroduce by the books. If you discover in reintroduction early on, as I did, that like goat cheese, for example, decimated me in my first reintroduction. I loved goat cheese so much, and I didn't realize how awful it made my stomach feel. I have yet to reintroduce goat cheese during a Whole30 because I don't miss it that much, and I kind of like don't even want to take the chance. I could if I wanted to, but I don't want to enough. So I'm not saying you have to reintroduce every single food in every single group every single time, but I don't want you to skip groups. I definitely want you to test things again. If you think about it like a scientific experiment, the scientific process is always testing the hypothesis. You're always prodding against it to go, does it hold up? Does it hold up? Do the same thing with your reintroduction. I'm pretty sure oatmeal works great for me. Does that hold up? I'm going to reintroduce it in this Whole30, and I'm going to go into it with an open mind. I'm not going to reintroduce it and not pay attention and go, I know this works well, so I don't have to think about it. I'm going to test my hypothesis. Oatmeal works well in my body. I'm going to reintroduce, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to either affirm that hypothesis or I'm going to poke a hole in it. And either way, I've learned something incredibly valuable for my Whole30. So yes, I want you to reintroduce every single time. Yes, I like that. And Lizardo99 is saying reintroduction is a very intimate and tender time. It is, because you are with an open mind, without judgment, with real curiosity, from a place of self-care, giving something to your body and saying, how do we like this? How do we feel? How does this make us feel emotionally, physically, spiritually? Because all of those are aspects of reintroduction. It's not just the physical sensations. It's what does this bring to me emotionally, or from a psychological perspective, from a mental health perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from a family perspective, their cultural perspective. There are so many kind of areas in which I want you to reevaluate or to evaluate reintroduction. But it can be a very quiet, special, tender time. Absolutely. And I think it's wonderful that you're thinking about it that way. All right, let's get into the Crystal. I'm going to answer your question in a hot minute, Crystal. You're asking about going through reintroduction and then going back to the Whole30. No, I'm just going to answer it now. Well, then when are you going to work your food freedom? I really want you, the whole point of the Whole30 and the whole point of reintroduction is to get you to your food freedom. So imagine this. Imagine that you are like not a good swimmer and you are using floaties or like a kickboard. And then you go through really, really challenging, emotionally challenging, physically challenging swimming lessons. And you spend 30 days in swimming lessons, giving up your kickboard, giving up your floaties, learning how to swim, and you get done with those swim lessons and you like take a little test at the end and you pass the test and you're so excited. Nobody would suggest that you go back to your kickboard and floaties, because at that point you would be giving up all of the lessons that you've learned to go back to letting something else support you in your journey. there might be a time and a place for you to go back. I don't know if this analogy is perfect because I'm like coming up with it on the spot, but I think it could work. My point is, the Whole30 provides you this safe, supportive, like lesson learning environment that I want you to take with you into your life and apply it as you choose. Physical therapy is another good example of that. I go to PT for my elbow, I exercise it, they do treatment on it, but the goal when I get out of PT is to go back and start living my life again and use the elbow that I've built back up. If I just stay in PT forever and I never test the strength or mobility of this elbow that I've built back, like that, what's the point of that? I want you to take what you've learned and work your food freedom plan. And I don't want you to be so nervous about that you just come right back to eating according to the Whole30 rules forever, because that's not what the program was designed for. We'll offer you so much support in your food freedom. There's a plan, there's a book. We're going to continue to do lives. There's going to be so much support. But I want you to use your reintroduction as your template to say, now it is time for me to jump into my food freedom, and I'm going to work that food freedom plan. And I can offer you so much guidance there. Let's get into the reintroduction schedule that I have accidentally flashed a number of times. I have a hair in my mouth. I don't know where it's coming from though. You don't have to screenshot this because this is going up on Whole30 social media today. This entire schedule. So you don't have to screenshot it. You don't have to take notes, but we are going to talk about the reintroduction schedule the way that it's outlined. In the Whole30 books, in Whole30 Day by Day, in the Whole30, in, Food Freedom Forever, we are talking about introducing added sugar and alcohol as optional groups. Not everybody wants to reintroduce alcohol. Maybe some people don't drink. Maybe some people just don't miss it. Maybe people just like they want to just continue their like sober experience. That's cool. Totally get that. And some people historically have not wanted to introduce added sugar by itself because most of the time the sugar that they want to reintroduce comes as like a package deal with gluten or dairy. Like I'm talking ice cream, I'm talking donuts, I'm talking, muffins, chocolate, whatever. However, I did a poll in my Instagram feed, and of the more than 1,200 people who responded, 1,000 of you said, yes, I would like to break added sugar out as its own category. So what I'm doing for the purposes of these lives is I'm tweaking the reintroduction schedule from the official schedule just a bit to allow people who don't want to reintroduce alcohol not to have to sit through that in the very beginning. I'll explain as we move through the schedule. Here's what it's going to look like. We have the week of January 30th. We've got Whole30 Day 29, and then we've got Whole30 Day 30. We're going to be showing up here for a live, same time, same space, to do a celebration that you have completed the elimination phase of your Whole30 and to prep you for reintroduction. So that's going to be another day where I'm answering a ton of questions about reintroduction. We're coming up with specific meals or foods. We're talking about what to look for with each specific group. We're going to cover it on that day. Any day that you see yellow in the YouTube logo is the day that I'm going to be live. On February 1st, the first day of reintroduction, we're going to reintroduce added sugar all by itself. There's a reason that we are going to do this first. Number one, the vast majority of people who responded to my survey said that they wanted to reintroduce added sugar alone. Cool. The other reason that we're going to do this first is that I have typically designed the reintroduction schedule to be in order of least likely to be problematic to most likely to be problematic, according to the clinical experience, according to watching thousands of people go through the Whole30. I want you to start with the things that are least likely to be problematic so that you don't eat something the first day of your reintroduction that just sends you so far off the rails, it feels hard to recover from either a physical perspective or an emotional or mental health perspective. Added sugar by itself tends to be less problematic than some of the other food groups. And you're like, why? That doesn't make any sense. I really love sugar. But think about it. You love sugar when it is combined with other things. Nobody who craves sugar opens a packet of sugar and just dumps it down their throat and says, oh my gosh, that was so satisfying. We don't do that. We crave sugar in conjunction with other ingredients in other foods. It's the donut, it's the chocolate, it's the peanut butter cups, it's the ice cream. We crave sugary things, but the sugar itself is typically not the thing that sends us over the edge. We are going to start with added sugar as like a nice little test case. Autumn and I were talking about it in the chat with Shannon on the Whole30 HQ team, and we were like, this is like a nice little training wheels for reintroduction. It is a nice way to reintroduce some things back into your diet and maybe see how they impact, maybe if you choose to introduce artificial sweeteners, or if you choose to reintroduce maybe sugar multiple times throughout your day, you can keep an eye on, okay, is this impacting my digestion? Okay, is it impacting my joint pain and swelling? Is it impacting my cravings? But for the most part, I expect this to be a relatively low risk reintroduction for most people. When we talk about reintroducing added sugar by itself, I'm talking about taking something, your typical perfectly Whole30 meal, and adding a form of sugar to one component of it. So you would drink your coffee in the morning, but instead of your unsweetened nut pods, you would use the sweetened nut pods. So now your coffee would be the same level of creaminess, but there's an added hit of sweetness. That's reintroducing added sugar. For lunch, maybe instead of the Applegate no sugar chicken sausage in your frittata, you're using the Applegate honey maple chicken sausage. Or maybe you're drizzling some honey over your sweet potato. Or I'm thinking about another, maybe you're drinking an iced tea, but it's a sweetened iced tea instead of an unsweetened iced tea. So there are ways to add just sugar to the equation that we are going to test on this first Whole30 reintroduction day. And Laura is saying, thank you for changing the alcohol order. Yes, Laura, I'm going to talk about why I did that. Yes. Good. I'm so happy, Renelle, that the sugar explanation was helpful. That's great. So let me bring this back. Yes, I'm glad. So we're going to do added sugar, and I am going to be YouTube live that day. So we're going to be live. We're going to talk about how are we going to add sugar? What forms are we going to add sugar? What might you want to look for with sugar? We're going to cover it all. After every reintroduction food group, you go back to the Whole30 for 2 days to allow any potential negative symptoms to simmer back down. If you reintroduce dairy and you get so bloated and your stomach hurts so much and everything feels awful, and then the very next day you wake up and even though you're still bloated, you reintroduce gluten, now you're like piling reintroduction food groups on top of each other, and we don't want to do that. We want to allow the potential for any negative symptoms to die back down and to get back to a baseline. So it's 2 to 3 days between reintroduction groups. We're going to stick with 2 here. If you need more time between reintroduction groups, no problem. You can still sit in with the live. We'll just be a little bit ahead of schedule, or you can watch replays when you need them. So we're going to go back to the Whole30 for a day. I'm going to skip a YouTube live on that day because you're going to go back to Whole30 eating. And then on Friday, you are also back to the Whole30, but you're getting ready to prepare for reintroducing the next food group, which is legumes. This is going to be your soy, tofu, tempeh, edamame. This is going to be your black beans, chickpeas or hummus, your white beans, your kidney beans, your pinto beans, your navy beans. It's going to be your peanut butter. This is the legume reintroduction day. So we are going to come live before that day happens to talk about what are you going to reintroduce? How are you going to plan your meals? What's it going to look like? What might you want to be on the lookout for? How did sugar go? That's going to be week 1. And then you're going to have 2 more days where we're not doing lives. You're going to go reintroduce legumes on one day, and then you're going to go back to the Whole30. Let me look. Okay, now let's jump into week 2. Week 2, on Monday, you're also going to be back on the Whole30. So this is your second day back on the Whole30 after legumes, but we're going to prep you to reintroduce 2 food groups on this day, gluten, grains, and dairy. The reason I have to double up is because I am traveling the entire rest of this week. I'm going to be in New York, and I'm actually doing like 2 different trips, all for media, and I will not be able to do lives while I'm traveling. My schedule is too hectic. So what we're going to do, because I'm not going to leave you hanging, is that we are going to prep on Monday for the next 2 food groups, non-gluten, grains, and dairy. I'm going to walk you through both of them. What foods are in these food groups? What kinds of things would you maybe want to reintroduce? How could you reintroduce them into a Whole30 meal? What are some of the things that you're looking for with these food groups? We're going to prep for both of them. And then on your own, you're going to reintroduce non-gluten grains, go back to the Whole30 for 2 days, and reintroduce dairy. I am flying back from my trip. Oh no, I think I actually have to fly back Saturday now. Stand by. I will see if I can get home in time to do a live on Saturday, or yes, because Sunday is Super Bowl. I was planning on doing a live on Sunday, and then I realized that it's Super Bowl Sunday, and nobody's going to want to do a live with me on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, that is. So I'm going to find a time on Saturday where I can come live for you. It might not be at 11 a.m. It might be later on in the afternoon. We'll figure it out, but I will show up for you. And we're going to do a live on Saturday to talk about prepping for gluten grains. This is another big category. And we're going to talk about, look, the reintroduction schedule has you going back to the Whole30 on Super Bowl Sunday. And I thought about it and I was like, do I want to change it? Do I want to adjust it? Do we want to like stretch it out, or do we want to finagle it? And I ended up saying no. Reintroduction schedule is what it is. And you are going back to the Whole30 on your Super Bowl Sunday. So you have two choices here. You can either choose to adjust the reintroduction schedule on your own if you really want to bring something back for Super Bowl Sunday. You can absolutely do that. No problem. This is only like a suggestion. This is not mandatory, this schedule. Or you can plan the most kick-ass Super Bowl menu featuring only Whole30 compatible foods and blow everybody's mind because it's going to be so damn good. Those are your choices. Or you can also not care about the Super Bowl and not even watch it. I didn't even realize it was Sunday. Someone on my team had to tell me. Anyway, this is what we're doing for this second week too. I will let you know what time we're going to be live on Saturday, but we're definitely going to go live. I got you. Then we're heading into week 3. So week 3, and again, you don't have to do screenshots or write this down. It's going up on the Whole30 social media feed today. You are going to have a day on Monday where you're reintroducing gluten grains. And then you're going to have a day where you go back to the Whole30. And then we are going to come back together on Wednesday to go back to the Whole30. This is the day that you're still eating Whole30, but we're going to talk about people who choose to prep for the alcohol reintroduction. We moved alcohol at the end, and it was actually somebody's idea in my Instagram DMs, and I was like, that's genius. We moved alcohol to the end so that if you did want to reintroduce alcohol, we've got you. We're going to talk about how to do it, what it looks like, what to look for, quantities, frequency, how do you reintroduce alcohol, and what to look for in reintroduction. If you don't care about reintroducing alcohol, no big deal. You can skip this live and it would officially be day 1 of your food freedom. Or you could just be on the Whole30 for like 1 extra day to catch up with us. That's absolutely your choice. But I saved it to the end so that if you don't want to reintroduce alcohol, you can just drop off, and the people who want to can, and won't hold up the people who don't want to. And then on Thursday, it looks like, it's so small on my screen, we are going to come together again for a YouTube live to talk about, of course, if you are reintroducing alcohol, we can touch on that. But this is kind of like the reintroduction wrap up. All of your food groups at this point, except alcohol, are done. And now we're going to talk about, what did you learn? What did you experience? What did you journal? What did you notice? What are you taking away from reintroduction? What are some things that surprised you? What are some things that you were delighted by? What foods work great for you that you didn't expect? What doesn't work for you that you didn't expect? We're going to cover all of this on this kind of day of Thursday, which is it's so small, 16th. We're going to do a YouTube live. At that point, if you are reintroducing alcohol, you've got to go back to the Whole30 for 2 days anyway. If you are not reintroducing alcohol, your next 2 days are food freedom. And by the end of that week, everybody is in their food freedom now. And we're not done, because even though the reintroduction is over, we've got 1 more day. We've got this President's Day holiday on Monday that Whole30 team has off. But then Tuesday, we are coming back together on February 21st, and this is going to be all of it. It's going to be the wrap up from the January Whole30. It's going to be the wrap up from reintroduction. We're going to share our best NSVs. We're going to talk about food freedom. This is going to be the sort of end to this particular YouTube series. And I am absolutely going to continue going live in February and March to talk about food freedom. And the content team just needs a little bit of time to think about what that's going to look like and what the strategy is. So we've got a meeting to schedule to talk about what the ongoing lives are going to look like, which is why you don't see anything in the calendar, but like, it's absolutely going to happen. We're going to continue to touch base on a regular basis about your food freedom. I really want to continue the discussion, and I definitely want to continue the lives. So this is what the YouTube Live reintroduction schedule looks like. I'm going to say this. You can do it any way you want. You don't have to follow a reintroduction schedule from YouTube Live. You don't have to follow one in the book. You can make your own up if you want to. If you really miss bread and pasta and you want to reintroduce gluten grains first, go for it. That is entirely up to you how you choose to reintroduce. What I would say is please only reintroduce one food group at a time. That's really important for the learnings. And please make sure that you go back to the Whole30 for at least 2 days in between reintroduction food groups to get yourself back to that baseline. That's the advice that I will give you. And then also, you're all grown-ups and you can do anything you want. So here we go. Let me go back through the chat. Susan is saying, do you choose multiple items from a group in one day? Yes, I am going to cover this, or Susan, this is covered in the, let me take all these down real quick. This is covered in the webinar, the Chipotle reintroduction, Kickstart Your Reintroduction webinar that's on YouTube that we've linked to. We tell you exactly what this looks like and how many food groups and et cetera. But yes, ideally, on any one day, you are going to reintroduce multiple foods from that food group, something with every meal, and you want to reintroduce with what we call like a challenge amount. So if you're reintroducing dairy and you're like, okay, I'm going to reintroduce with cream in my coffee, and you put like the tiniest splash of cream in your coffee, there's a good chance that you haven't reintroduced enough of it to actually provoke a response if there is one. So you want to include an appropriate challenge to your system when you reintroduce. So let's keep dairy as an example. On dairy day, you can add cream to your coffee and maybe put some cheese over your omelet. And then at lunch, maybe you do sour cream with your Whole30 jicama tacos. Or maybe with breakfast, you choose an unsweetened full-fat yogurt or a Greek yogurt or a cottage cheese. Then with lunch, you've got maybe cheese or you've got sour cream. You want to reintroduce enough of that with every meal from that food group that you are appropriately challenging your system. You can also break it down even further if you want. For lunch, you can reintroduce cheddar cheese, which comes from cows, and you could reintroduce maybe a goat cheese or a sheep's milk cheese with dinner. You can choose to kind of break it out as much as you want. I would ask a few things. The first thing with reintroduction that we talk about is you want the rest of your meal to be Whole30 compatible. So again, the easiest way to reintroduce just one food group at a time is to take a Whole30 meal that you love, that you've already been eating, and add something to it from that reintroduction food group. So take the Whole30 smoky sweet potato chili from the Whole30 slow cooker cookbook. Gosh, that chili is so good. You've been eating it all along. You love it. Works so great for you. Use that chili as a base and add black beans to it on legume day. Or use that chili as a base and add cheese and sour cream to it on dairy day. Or use that chili as a base and add a bunch of tortilla chips, and maybe you put some corn in the chili for non-gluten grain day. So that's one way, the easiest way for you to figure out how to reintroduce is you take a Whole30 meal that's already a base and just add something from the reintroduction food group to it. That's the easiest way to keep it simple and to keep your reintroduction food groups separate and distinct, one food group at a time. And yes, you want to choose multiple items from a group in one day. So on your gluten grain day, you can reintroduce bread and pasta and maybe like a bran muffin. One thing I would recommend is for you during this period of reintroduction to keep items relatively low sugar. Could you reintroduce a donut on gluten day? You definitely could. But now you not only have gluten, you've got the addition of like a whack load of added sugar to add a little bit of a confounding factor into the mix. If you want to know how you respond to gluten, then I would do a gluten source that is relatively low sugar. So again, bread would be a good example, a sourdough, a whole wheat bread, a pasta, maybe it's a cereal, like a basic, no sugar, like a low sugar cereal, like frosted mini wheats. I don't think that has a ton of sugar. Or maybe you could just do like regular mini wheats if you're a cereal person and use it with your normal unsweetened almond milk. But if you try to reintroduce something with a food group that also has a ton of sugar on it, it might be hard to tease apart the impact of the sugar on things like blood sugar regulation and mood and cravings from the gluten itself. So that's my recommendation. And I'm not saying don't ever reintroduce donuts, but here's what's so cool about it. If you reintroduce bread and pasta, I'm having a hard time thinking of like another gluten containing thing because I don't eat it that often. But if you reintroduce bread, pasta, and say like a low sugar cereal on gluten day, and you know how it impacts you, and you're like, okay, I get a little bloated, but otherwise I feel pretty okay, like not too bad. And then a week into your food freedom, you reintroduce a donut, like your favorite kind of donut, whatever that is. And now you have the experience of gluten and sugar, and you go, oh my God, that donut decimated me. I had to go take a nap. I felt awful. I was cranky. I had a headache. That gives you incredibly valuable information about the specific combination of gluten and sugar for you. And the reason that you have that comparison is because you know what plain old gluten did when you reintroduced it. So as much as you can really think about like baby stepping this as a scientific experiment and not adding too much up front, I think the more you'll learn from your Whole30. One food group at a time, keep it relatively simple, keep the rest of your meal Whole30 compatible, use enough to challenge the system, and you will find all of this information and even a bunch of recommendations for how you could reintroduce various food groups with your Whole30 Chipotle salad bowl in that reintroduction presentation, the webinar that's on YouTube. So that's a good question, and good job. Brittany is saying there are so many delicious Whole30 recipes for Super Bowl Sunday. So true. Oh, that buffalo chicken dip is amazing, isn't it? That smoky sweet potato chili. Last year for Super Bowl, I was in San Diego with my sister. We made Michelle Tam's Kahlua pork, and it was a huge hit. Everybody loved it. And if there are people who aren't doing a Whole30, throw down a bag of tortilla chips and throw down some vegetable crudité, and everybody can dip into the guacamole their own way. They can bring beer if they want to, and you're going to be drinking your like LaCroix or Shrubly or whatever your Whole30 compatible option is. So yes, there are definitely ways to do it, and it would be amazing. Brenda's saying you would watch it live with me on Super Bowl Sunday. That's really nice of you. Thank you. I don't even know if we're going to watch the Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't even know who's in it. It doesn't matter. Sorry if you're a big Super Bowl fan. After you reintroduce an item, and then you do the following 2 days, oh, what a good question. One Christian gal, what a good question. No, I want you to keep every reintroduction food group separate and distinct. So if you reintroduce dairy one day and then you go back to the Whole30 and then your next group is gluten grains, I want you to leave dairy out of the equation entirely. You're only reintroducing one food group at a time for the sake of the experiment. Trust me on this. As slow as you are willing to go during reintroduction, you will learn exponentially more from the experience. If you are willing to stretch it out, to draw it out, gosh, you could do a month of reintroduction and just learn so much from the experience. Most people don't want to stretch it out that much. That is okay. But the bare minimum that I'm recommending and that elimination diets recommend is one food group at a time. So you bring dairy in one day, you eat cheese and sour cream and yogurt and cottage cheese with all the things, and then you go back to the Whole30, and then the next day, dairy is like holding on for your food freedom. It's just sitting there chilling. It'll still be there, and you're going to reintroduce your gluten grains and only your gluten grains into your Whole30 meals. What a great question. Thank you so much for asking. Melanie, I'm so glad that this is helpful. This has been really, really fun to work on with the content team. So Laura is saying, could you be confusing things if you do dairy from different sources? Yes, absolutely. So, some people might choose to break out reintroduction food groups even further. They might do 2 dairy days, and one day would be for cow's milk products only, and one day might be for sheep and goat's milk products. People may choose to break out non-gluten grain day. They want to do one for like rice and quinoa, which tend to be like pretty well tolerated, and another one for oats and corn, which tend to be maybe not as well tolerated. Again, just general estimations based on my experience. So you could do that. What I would say though is that I want you to think about reintroduction as a lifelong experience. We've talked about this before. I'll talk about it again. When you are in your food freedom and you reintroduce something that was not part of Whole30 elimination, I always want you to pay attention, because in your food freedom, you have the opportunity to continue to learn more and more about how foods you are eating impact you. Because in your food freedom, you won't be sticking to this more rigid reintroduction schedule. In your food freedom, you're not going to say, well, I really want the bread with this restaurant meal, so I definitely shouldn't have the creme brulee for dessert. Like, no, if it's worth it, it's worth it. And you're going to enjoy multiple things, and you will have multiple food groups in at once. You'll have gluten plus sugar, you'll have dairy plus gluten if you really want a pizza. So in your food freedom, you will continue to have opportunities to figure out, okay, how do the nuances of what I'm eating impact me? How does the combination of gluten plus dairy in a pizza feel? And does it feel different than when I reintroduce dairy by itself and gluten by itself? Or maybe the next time you go for pizza, you say, okay, I'm going to try the gluten-free pizza, and I'm going to compare the gluten-free pizza to how the normal pizza impacted me last week in my food freedom. There are always opportunities to learn more about how food works for you, and I want you to just continue to think about it from that perspective. Not to be so caught up in it or anxious about it or so detailed about it that you don't have any fun eating. But just think of it as like everybody loves to learn about themselves. Everybody loves to talk about themselves, to learn about themselves, to be told things about themselves. It's why these personality profiles are so popular, because when I read my Enneagram 8 description, I'm like, that's me, and that feels really good. I want you to think about this as an opportunity to learn more about you. And that's just such a fun, amazing, wonderful subject that will benefit you in every single area. So when you eat something in your food freedom, think about it as just another cool extension of reintroduction and pay attention. And then compare it back to your Whole30. So if you want to break those food groups out even more, you can. And also you don't have to, because you'll have plenty of opportunity in your food freedom to continue to play around and experiment with what reintroduction feels like. Meredith is saying, if we do lots of different types of dairy, okay, this is the perfect follow-up to that question. How did I figure out that sour cream worked and not cottage cheese? Because I reintroduced in my food freedom sour cream by itself a couple times. And I was like, every single time I reintroduced it, that worked well. And when I reintroduced cottage cheese all by itself, it didn't work well. So I like playing with my diet. I like playing around with it. I think it's fun to continue to do these self-experiments even now. Even now in my food freedom, 13 years after my first Whole30, I'm still buying Kite Hill sour cream and the grass-fed whatever sour cream from my local health food store. And one night when I have the chili, I'm using the Kite Hill, and the other night when I have the chili, I'm using the regular. And I'm like, how do they compare? How did I do with both of these? I'm buying different brands. I'm buying different brands of hummus. I'm buying Ithaca hummus, and I'm buying my local, Sprouts brand hummus, and I'm comparing. And I have found that I just do better with this one particular brand of hummus than this other brand. I look at reintroduction as such an opportunity for like lifelong learning about my body and my food freedom. So I might not have discovered on dairy day that sour cream didn't work well and cottage cheese did, or vice versa. What I knew was there were some aspects of dairy that did not work well for me at all. And what that meant was that in my food freedom, I was going to be very careful about how I chose to eat dairy so that I could ideally avoid those negative effects. So I would go to a restaurant and I'd have a salad with feta, and I would eat a little bit of the feta and see how I felt. And I'd be like, okay, that felt okay. And I would go to a restaurant and I'd have a salad with Parmesan, and I'd eat the Parmesan and I go, yeah, that felt okay too. I would just continually play around with these various food groups to figure out how they work for me. I look at it as like a really fun self-experiment where I get to pay attention and learn as much as I can about me, my favorite subject, as it is for everybody, I feel like. And I think that's a great question. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Michelle, yes, we have the webinar link here for you. Again, thank you so much, Whole30, for dropping that in the comments. You can also just go to the Whole30 YouTube channel and go to videos. And it's the Kickstart Your Reintroduction webinar. We don't have a ton of videos up yet. We're working on building out the channel, but if you go to the videos tab, you will find it there. Kathleen, regular Cheerios. Yes, thank you. That's a great source of gluten. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea for testing gluten grains. I think that's great. Kim is saying, I'm only missing non-gluten grains. Could I just do a couple weeks of adding non-gluten grains and a regular reintroduction schedule with the rest? You definitely could. You can stretch this out or play it any way you want. And if you don't want to reintroduce gluten because you don't care or you don't miss it at all, Do you have to reintroduce black beans if you don't like them and don't ever plan on enjoying them? No, definitely not. I don't think I've ever reintroduced lentils on purpose because they just weren't part of they weren't a legume that I particularly enjoyed or cared about. But I really love pinto beans and I really love black beans, and I definitely reintroduced those. What I will say is that if you suspected coming into your Whole30 that you have a food sensitivity, if you already recognized coming into your Whole30 that like gluten doesn't work well in your system, you might want to reintroduce on purpose just so you know how much it messes with you. So that when you go to a restaurant, you can say, I absolutely cannot have any gluten. I have a serious sensitivity and I need this meal to be gluten-free. So you can really have them pay attention to that. Or you might reintroduce it and be like, oh, it's not terrible. So like, yeah, I'll go to restaurants and I'll order off the gluten-free menu. And I would say like, I'd like the gluten-free option, but I know if I get accidentally dosed, it's not going to send me back into bed for like 2 days. That might be something you would want to test, and that's up to you. Obviously, if you know that you have an allergy to something, please do not reintroduce that. I hope that goes without saying. You never want to introduce a food that is allergenic unless it is under the absolute like directive of and supervision of a medical doctor. An allergy is a very different thing than a food sensitivity. So don't reintroduce things that you know you're allergic to. Okay, glad I could say that. Thank you very much. Kara is saying we love having Whole30 Super Bowls, and you are the only yes, you're the only people who feel great on Monday. Yeah, because you're not hungover or like super bloated or super tired from all the junk you ate. Yes, and also, during the Super Bowl, you're sitting around for hours. That thing is long. So the last thing I want to do when I'm just sitting on the couch for like 4 or 5 hours in a row is eat really heavy food. I want to eat light food, delicious food that makes me feel really good the next day. I think that is amazing. We will, hands down, talk about what potential menu could be, like what food groups or, recipes are on the menu for Super Bowl Sunday when we talk that Saturday. I think that would be a very fun explanation. Susan is saying you're loving the information. Can't figure it all out in the reintroduction, lifelong learning. That's it, Susan. You've nailed it. That's absolutely it. It would be unrealistic to expect you to learn everything about how your body reacts to every different food out there in just a 10-day reintroduction. I mean, if I had my druthers and it was so easy for everybody, I'd be like, oh, let's do like a 2-month reintroduction. Let's go so slow. Let's really drag it out. Let's really pay attention. But that's not accessible to most people. And I want you to get into your food freedom as quick as is reasonably possible. So we've got a schedule here that goes beyond the 10 days a bit. But reintroduction is a lifelong process. It is lifelong learning, and I will continue to talk about that when we are in our YouTube lives in our food freedom phase. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great. And Laura is also saying thank you for explaining things deeper and clearer. Okay, we got through everything today that I wanted to get through. I briefly talked about the importance of reintroduction and the impact that it will have on not only your Whole30 learnings, but your food freedom. We covered the reintroduction schedule that we'll be going through here in the YouTube lives. You will also find that posted on Whole30's social media feed later on today. We talked about your homework, which was the reintroduction webinar on the schedule on Instagram is already up. Brilliant. So go to that feed. We talked about the reintroduction webinar already. It is on YouTube, Whole30's YouTube channel, under the videos tab. I'm talking too fast while I'm trying to do too many things. Under the videos tab, and that's what you're going to look at over the course of the weekend. And here is the link to the webinar again. And then we're going to come back on Monday because I'm not here tomorrow because I'm taking the day off. So I hope all of you have a wonderful Whole30 weekend. I think it definitely goes without saying, but like we are going to rock our Whole30s this weekend. We're going to put Whole30 food in our mouth. We are going to finish so strong. We are going to eke out every last bit of those NSVs that we're going to get over the next couple days. We're going to squeeze the juice out of all of them. Everybody here is going to have a wonderful, amazing, restorative, relaxing, full of NSV weekend. And when we come back on Monday, we're going to talk about Whole30 day 28, I guess, 28, almost there. And start talking more about reintroduction and what's going to happen in the second phase of your Whole30. So we are there. I hope everybody has a really good weekend. So good to see you here today. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks for all of the comments, all of the really, really good questions. Go watch that webinar. Make sure you like this video. Give it a thumbs up before you head out for the day. And everybody enjoy your weekend. Thanks so much. Good to see everyone here. And thanks to Whole30 HQ in the comments, as always, coming in clutch. I'll see you soon.